Hello and welcome to the Black Rose Garden. By the end of yesterday night, I managed to kill Act 10 Kitava, so finishing the entire campaign, and I also reached level 70. The best part is that I did everything without dying. Yep, that's right, I haven't died a single time in the Gauntlet yet. God, I love jinxing myself. Even I'm surprised, but I'm also happy about it. And now I'm much more confident in the strength of my build. Before, people were telling me that, oh, Witch isn't going to be tanky enough or SRS doesn't do enough damage in the campaign. Well, it turned out that both of those things were untrue, at least during the campaign. In fact, after getting my gems in Act 3, I never really went below half health outside of specific boss mechanics. There's still almost a full week before the Gauntlet ends, so I thought that some of you would find it useful for an update to my build, and with more detail as well. So here it is. Let's first talk about the Endgame PoB that I made just a couple of changes to. So this is a tree. It's very similar to the one I put in the video last time, and this time I'll link the path of building in the description below. The tree was already pretty tight because you want to fit in as much life nodes as you can while you need minion instability, you need Eldritch Battery, you need the mana reservation, spell suppression, and then as many of the minion damage and minion life nodes as you could take. So it's pretty tight. I'm pretty happy with it. The main changes are I added this mastery, which is super important. It reduces your physical damage taken. It converts 10% of physical damage taken as chaos damage. And even during the campaign, you should try to be as close as possible to capping your chaos res. I also added a Lith Shade because this is just a really good survivability one that gives you more reaction time to really strong damage over time effects. And what I removed was a couple of pretty useless minion masteries, like we don't even use offerings because most of our damage comes from minion instability. You don't need minion accuracy either. And I also took out this node because, again, your minions don't need attack speed since it's not a minion attack build, it's a minion explode build. And as I said before, by the time you get to endgame, you'll be pretty close to block and spell block capped, although this is with assuming you get a roomies, but if you don't, then it'll be slightly lower. You'll have a good amount of spell suppression, although it's almost impossible to get the 100%, so you really abuse this lucky chance. And of course, the last few things is you need to take this golem cluster, because golems are a big part of our defenses, and also this curse cluster, so that we can have 2 curses. Now onto the Ascendancy. This hasn't changed at all. This one is the last one you're going to take, so if you don't do Uber Lab, this is how it should look. I would recommend going Bastion of Elements as your first lab to be as defensive as possible, and then you take the 2 golem ones in the next ones. For your Wildwood Ascendancy, I actually decided that also the Magi isn't worth it. Even though 25% increased maximum life is really good, at least I wouldn't be willing to sacrifice 4 gem sockets for it. And so instead, you just take the bark skin and then the one after that, which makes bark skin even stronger against ailments. And you can actually get both of these pretty early on, although the quest for the second Wildwood Ascendancy does take a while because you have to farm 4,000 vivid wisps from a specific type of enemy. Now, I also changed the skills a little bit. The one that I added that I found was really good is Enduring Cry. You can take this super early, and if you use this while standing in the middle of a pack of mobs, it'll just give you free endurance charges, which is more physical damage reduction, and part of its buff effect is even more physical damage reduction, actually, and it gives you an insane amount of life regen, so you can consider it as like an additional flask if you're low on life. We're also including Barkskin in the final aura lineup. Before, I'm pretty sure I had the classic defensive setup of Tempest Shield, Determination, Grace, and Defiance Banner. But I found that if you take all the nodes that I have here and then you craft a 2% increased mana reservation efficiency jewel, then you're able to fit a 25% reservation aura instead of Defiance Banner. So I think Barkskin is the best one. because both the armor part of it and the evasion part of it is super good since you take determination and grace. Other than the auras, let's just go through the gems really quick. So your SRS of Enormity is your main damage skill. I finished the campaign without getting this. That's what I feel like most people do, is you finish campaign first and then you go back to normal lab and then you run that until you get the transfigured gem that you want, because it takes quite a while. Infernal Legion obviously is necessary because you need your minions to blow themselves up. Minion Life and then Unleashed are probably the next two most important. So if you have a 4-link, it should be SRS, Infernal Legion, Minion Life, and Unleashed. And then after that, you can do Fire Pen. You can actually do Combustion too. And the increased critical damage you only want after you get the SRS of Enormity, because only the transfigured version has the guaranteed crits that can take advantage of the increased critical damage. Now this is our golem setup. Obviously, this is how I came up with my build in the first place. And why I chose to do Elementalist is so that I can have extra tankiness from the golems to get physical damage reduction from Chaos Golems. And my Stone Golems of Safeguarding will take about like 40 to 50% of melee damage before my life. This says 10%, but with all of the various forms of golem effect buff, it'll be around 40 to 50. And then of course you want them to be as tanky as possible, so Minion Life. And for the 4th link, the best in slot is actually Enhance, because Enhance increases the buff effect and it increases the minion life. But you'll probably not find Enhance, so you would put in Meat Shield here, although Meat Shield doesn't allow your Stone Golems to take extra melee damage for you the way that minion life can, so it's not as good. Flame Dash for movement skill, Bulb Molten Shell. I can't even fit cast when damage taken, and I think it's better if you don't, so that you can have a higher level of Molten Shell / Bulb Molten Shell. The utility Arcanist branch setup with Wave of Conviction, Flammability, and Enfeeble. If you want more damage, you can replace Enfeeble with Ally Weakness. And in order for Wave of Conviction to actually give fire exposure instead of lightning, you want to make sure you cast Flammability before Wave of Conviction. So you want to make sure you order it correctly in your gem socket. And then we have Stone Golem of Hordes in order to get 2 additional golems, and they will be the ones proccing Feeding Frenzy. And I also added Raised Spectre here because there is this one extremely good Spectre for this build, which is called the Perfect Meat Sack, and it causes your minions to have 40% increased maximum life, which for your minion stability SRS, this simply means more damage, and it also means that your Stone Golem Safeguarding can take even more melee damage before you. So this is extremely good. And then, of course, Barkskin from the Wildwood Ascendancy, Shield Charge, and then the Enduring Cry is one that I added. The items didn't change at all, except I added the Reservation Efficiency Jewel. You don't need any of these, although the most important one to take is Tavukai because it gives a lot more damage. But you honestly don't need any of them, and they're kind of just luxury. Most of them, like Roomies or Lightning Coil, they're just here in order to give you more defenses, to improve your defenses, but you can do just fine with only rares. Now I want to go over the leveling for the build, because I think taking the passive points in a particular order is pretty important. So I thought the best way to do this is actually to show you the nodes that I take from a blank tree. So in the beginning of the game, you're going to start with using Rolling Magma as your main source of damage, but also have a 1-link Flame Wall and Holy Flame Totem. This is like the classic leveling build for any Witch or Templar. And for the passive, you're going to first path to Enduring Bond, and then you're going to path up here to this life node and take the plus 50 to maximum life mastery. Ideally, you want to get here by the time you get to Brutus so that you can be as tanky as possible for the Brutus fight. Then after Brutus, you're going to continue using your Rolling Magma build until you can path over and take minion instability. This is when you should switch over to using SRS. You should be able to get to this point in the passive tree right before you get to Merveil. If you try to swap to SRS before taking minion instability, your damage is going to be super, super low. For the SRS links, the most important support gem is Infernal Legion, so that your SRS actually lose life, so they can proc minion instability. And the third link should be Combustion. And this is for Act 1. I would recommend continuing to still use Flame Wall and the Holy Flame Totem just for additional damage. And all you do is replace your Rolling Magma with SRS. The other option is to not go for minion instability and not swap to SRS, and instead just keep using Rolling Magma and Holy Flame Totem. But then in the passive tree, you would need to path over to Elemental Overload and probably take the Fire Element damage, and these you would all need to unspec later, so I don't recommend it. You want your passive tree to look like this by the time you fight Merveil, or even better if you can take this node, although that's one additional level. After finishing Act 1, you can path your passive tree this way, but before Act 3, before you reach the library in Act 3, you want to make sure you come over and take Eldritch Battery and this reservation. Taking EB actually greatly increases your defenses, even though that's counterintuitive because you're losing your energy shield. It is because taking EB allows you to reserve 100% of your mana. This is important only once you reach the library, because you'll get access to Determination, and your auras can be Determination, Tempest Shield, and Bark Skin. Once you take this Mastery that gives mana reservation efficiency, you can actually drop the Bark Skin when you're just clearing zones and you don't need to be as tanking, and you can put in Summon Skitterbots for additional damage. Now continuing forward, you want to continue pathing down here until you take Glancing Blows, which is another really big defensive layer. After around this point, I started feeling like I was a little bit lacking damage, so you want to go over here and take this, along with this very important mastery of 30% increased maximum life. This will be a huge boost to your damage. Then you can take this life cluster and this life cluster to be really tanky. And then you want to path up here to take Sovereignty plus this life node. And then you want to come over here and take this to complete all of the aura related and reservation efficiency related nodes. And the reason why taking those early is important is because this allows you to add in Grace in your build. You'll probably be nearing the end of the campaign. By this point, you'll be able to fit in Determination, Grace, Tempest Shield, and Defiance Banner. As I mentioned before, if you are lucky enough to be able to roll a 2% increased reservation efficiency jewel, so they're actually really hard to roll, you can take this jewel socket, and what this allows you to do is change your aura setup to be Determination, Grace, Tempest Shield, and Bark Skin. Then after that, I wanted more damage, so I took these two notables, which gives a lot of damage. Obviously, you want to take this increased aura effect, as well as this Minion Penetrates Curses. Then by the time you get to around here, you'll be at the end of the campaign, and you can fill out the rest of the tree based on what I have in the POB. So a few more leveling tips that I learned from my experience is pretty early on in like Act 4, if I'm remembering correctly, vendors will start selling you amethyst rings, and you want to buy them and alch them in order to hopefully get life. Also in Act 5, you're going to have a quest reward that gives you flask choices, and you should probably choose amethyst so that you can be as close to capping chaos res as possible. In the campaign of the Gauntlet, there is this mod that adds 20% extra physical damage as chaos. So pretty much every monster will be doing chaos damage, which is why chaos resistance is super important. For your weapon, you want to try to get a minion wand that has the implicit minion damage, and then you want to alteration spam it until you get either minions deal increased damage or minions have increased life. And then afterwards, I just regaled it so I could craft resistances on it. Everything else, you just want life and resistances and attributes. This build, as with most witch builds, is pretty starved for dexterity, so you're going to need to get quite a bit of dexterity on your gear, and you'll probably also need to take this dexterity node as well. And I think that's pretty much everything, and I will be continuing to stream my Gauntlet run over the next few days on this YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.